Sangeetha Saxena. I'm a web consultant at eDynamic, and today I'd like to talk a little about the key questions you need to ask when you're selecting a web content management product for your organization. The objective of today's presentation is to provide a quick overview of the key things to keep in mind when selecting a WCM. This presentation is targeted more towards a mid-market audience. What we won't be covering during this session is the selection process itself, so for details on that subject, you can contact us for our WCM selection process paper. With so many products out there to choose from, selecting the right product can feel frustrating or overwhelming. No single product is going to work for every organization or business needs, so you really want to understand what to look for in a WCM so you can find the one that's going to work for you. It's easy to get caught up in the long list of features and capabilities for each product and miss out on basic evaluation criteria. But the cost of these mistakes can be significant, so you do want to make sure you're looking at the right criteria to begin with. Let's start by looking at the product itself. You'll need to assess several features and components, of course, as well as take implementation considerations to mind. We'll go through these items in a little more detail in the following slides. With so many features to choose from, it's easy to make the mistake of selecting the product that seems to have the most features available. Take a look at the product strategy before you go through the feature list. We advise our clients to ask for direction on the product roadmap, and while vendors may not share their roadmap with you, they can give you some sense of what the overall strategy looks like and where the product is headed. You can also look at history as an indicator of the future and consider how many versions of the product have been rolled out in the past few years. You'll need to decide if you need a tool that's more focused on developers or on business users. Nowadays, end users are very often marketers, so more and more vendors are making their products visually pleasing with features specific for marketing needs. The next question to ask yourself is whether a standalone solution is right for you or if you should go for software as a solution or a SaaS option. SaaS is good for simple implementations, but there are advantages and disadvantages of both options. SaaS solutions have excellent performance and cost efficiencies and tend to roll out newer features more often, but you may face challenges around the flexibility you want to customize your site, the ability to integrate with existing systems, or perceived lack of data ownership. Beyond meeting your immediate project needs, you need to make sure the product ecosystem is going to support your long-term requirements. For example, our customers often ask us to integrate with digital asset management, document management systems, search, social platforms, e-commerce systems. So if it's a standalone product, consider what the vendor offers as part of the ecosystem. And if it's not, find out how well it's going to integrate with the other products that you might need. In either case, make sure you're looking for proven implementations. Next, what's the product's market strategy? Is it an enterprise product or is it targeted at mid-market organizations? What's its focus? Many vendors are using their products now to offer solutions. For example, Red Dot's new social media strategy, Bloom. The one thing you want to watch out for is a product that's positioned as being everything for everyone. In some cases, while a product may offer certain capabilities, for example, e-commerce or search components, you may be better off working with a vendor that's specializing in just that component if it's a priority for you. That said, if a product is focused on your particular industry or business needs and has a client portfolio to prove it, then it should definitely make your shortlist. Now let's look at the technology used. Typically, most products use .NET, Java, or open source, and one of two common delivery architectures. But before we go into that, let's talk about the open source option for just a minute. There are excellent open source platforms available, but the question you need to ask yourself here is whether or not you're going to be a strong tech shop. Beyond just understanding the product, for successful open source implementation, you really need to have a strong knowledge of the underlying technology. Now that said, there are products with strong support models in place, for example, Alfresco and Drupal, but on the whole, since these developments are relatively new, they're still somewhat unproven. Another thing to consider around open source are the costs for development and maintenance, which tend to be higher than for proprietary products, so open source may not work out to be the low-cost option that it appears to be. Another concern we hear from marketers is around ease of use. Proprietary products typically have a more intuitive user interface, which of course has a direct impact on end user adoption. One thing to keep in mind about open source is that when a product does well, it quickly develops a massive following, like Drupal, for example. On the other hand, a product that falls out of favor finds it harder to grow. So if you do want to go open source, make sure that the product that you've chosen has a strong and active community that will contribute to its development. Okay, now let's go back to delivery architecture. There are typically two options here, having separate production and delivery instances, like Red Dot, for example, or having them as a single instance, for example, Sitecore. Separating production and delivery works well for sites with high content volume, while single instance architecture is best for dynamic sites. Another major technology consideration is the product's ability to integrate with intranet, CRM, search, social media, and this really has become more important now than ever before. We know that people naturally tend to resist change, so a product that can integrate easily with tools and processes that your organization is already familiar with will be picked up more quickly by your users. On the other hand, products with proprietary languages can be harder to learn, and this makes adoption a bit more of a challenge. Other points to keep in mind from a technology perspective include how pages are rendered, how secure the product is, how easy it is to upgrade, and performance considerations. Now, let's look at what a WCM is really all about, the content. You need to look at the product's ability to meet your organization's needs throughout the content cycle, including content production, management, and delivery. Let's begin with how content is created and developed in the WCM. Does the product support the type of content that you will be using on your website, including multimedia content? What authoring and transformation features are available? What editing features will your users have available? Also take a look at the workflow capabilities that are offered. You'll need to consider if it's flexible and can be customized to support your existing workflow. Certain features like the ability to enter workflow tasks into email applications or integration into existing intranets will again get your people using the WCM more quickly. Once you've created the content, how will you get it onto the live site? This is where you need to look at the product's deployment capabilities. Does it offer support for multi-stage deployment and publishing and centralized management for all stages of deployment? Next, how does a product manage your content? If the user interface includes drag and drop administration and design functionality, it will make it easier for non-technical users to manage content on the site. Also consider what is offered in terms of content classification and taxonomy. How are templates created and managed, and how are pages rendered? Consider how content types are categorized and organized. Is inheritance of content types available so that you can reuse your templates? Another thing to look at is media. Even the most basic websites today are dynamic and contain some form of media, audio, video, images, so you'll need to understand how the WCM